Okay, this is going to be my coverage of one of my games. Hold on. JOEX. Okay, so this is going to be my coverage of one of my games that I played last month at a tournament that I'm running, and this is the second game of that tournament. As you notice, I've been putting initials. That's because just in case they want privacy and don't want to know what their names are on public, I'm not giving it. So this player is Fresno's top under 18 type player. We used to have another one here that reached almost 1900, but he moved. And this one has been training for about 4 or 5 years now. And when he first started, I think he was 7 or 8. And he moved up the ranks pretty quickly. By the time he was 10, I think he was about 1600 or something like that. And now he's, I think, 14 or 13 or 14, I think, and maybe he's younger. I don't know, but I think he's around the 13 or 14. And he's he's starting to get very, very close to breaking 1800 forever. And we play a lot. I think official games we have. I think we have somewhere around 15 of them. And I have a wide plus score against him. I think he has 2 draws and 1 win out of 15 games. And so here's the game. We go there. So this is one of the benefits of knowing your opponent before you play him. I know he's going to play this stuff. He always does. It's kind of like a modern type defense where I think he takes like a Pribble stance depending on what you play, and it transposes into like an accelerated dragon of sorts. It's not really my style of play. He gets it from his early days of training, and the opening is sound, of course. So we will move on. I like the knight c2 thing because I like being able to reroute my knight. Now, on the downside, I haven't had yet somebody do the bishop takes like this because, well, it has the downside of having both of the pawns on the c file, which is where black's main counterplay is down the c file. So why put a huge glaring weakness down the only file that is really his thing? Now, on the plus side, he's exchanging the 2 bishops for making this weakness, and I suppose I could potentially use it as like a crazy version of the Mora, but I don't think it fits White's plans very well because this knight is over on c2 and not on f3. So I think I saw this once, or no, that's right. This type of position happened in the board right next to me. It's kind of crazy because one of the guys that is around my rating range in Fresno, he's always done this variation. He kind of introduced me to it a little bit, and I said, yeah, you know, it's got some merit. But he lost to the one of the guys that came out from San Luis Obispo or something, or San Diego or something like that, and it was this type of position that he lost to. So I might have to reassess my move order. I don't know. So now we get into the Marazzi bind type stuff. My decision to play bishop e3 was that I know that the knight wants to go to e3 at some point, and I don't mind moving it to get it there. And for right now, the knight is kind of working pretty good, you know, defending d4 and b4. So it doesn't necessarily need to go there right now. We're developing our forces. We need to get castled, and then eventually, if I want to put it there, it wouldn't be much to move the bishop in order to get the knight there. It might be a little cumbersome, but the way that I looked at it was that it wasn't much of a, depending on the type of position, it wasn't much of a downfall, because the knight doesn't have to go to e3. He can go to d4 as well, and he can go to b4 at some point as well too. So bishop e3. I do believe that we are in a basic book right now. 95 I think is common, and I think maybe bishop d7 was a little strange, but in this type of position I think the bishop goes to e6, and it might have been it actually might have been better here, but you know, this is common development. And this bishop, I will admit, was a move to just get it developed so I can castle. Wasn't really much of a place to put him yet. There's also another point that in some Sicilian type positions like this one, especially when you have almost a transposition like this pawn structure here, this almost looks like a Najdorf gone a little weird. So the only difference really is he didn't play e5, he played h5, and I have more space, and so I can start pushing. So if I was to push this pawn to f4, it would look almost like a classical Sicilian. So in some of those positions they will play f4 and bishop e3, and right now I feel like I've got more space, so I'm better. This move was in anticipation of the fact that I'm probably going to move e4 and f3, because that's where the most common attacking lines are, and usually pointing at like f7 and g6. And this particular move order kind of made me feel very comfortable, because why is he moving h7 and then back to g8? Is that taunting me, or is it not knowing what you're doing? I took it that he didn't really know what to do in this position, and so what I did is, since he wasted 2 moves, I can waste 1, and that's why I played h3, and that way I can threaten my f4, because since he doesn't have a rook on this h file, there really is no threat of him playing knight g4 to try to rip me open. And after f4, if he goes knight g4, I can just take it for free. So that was my reasoning behind h3, just based on the fact that he was playing wasting moves. And on that note as well, um, he could have, like, back here, like right here, there really isn't any problem with him playing b5. Oops. b5 here. I mean, why play king h7 when you actually have a plan? Okay, one of the breaks in the Marazzi bind is b5. It's b5, e5, d5, and f5. e5 really not so much, but b5, d5, and f5 are the main breaks in the Marazzi bind. So if you have one, why not do it? So this is probably in anticipation of f4, and eventually he moves his queen to a5, which at the time that he does, I don't think that it's all that great. So f4, king h7, see there, it's almost like he doesn't have any idea what he's doing here, or he's waiting for me to attack, and he thinks that his position is solid enough to allow me to advance my forces, or not allow me to advance my forces. So maybe he's thinking that if I advance too much that he can intercept everything, and I don't think that's the case. Here's the queen a5. So at this point I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's an okay move, but I mean, what is he really doing? He's not going for the b5 break, and he doesn't look like he's going for the d5 break right now, and maybe never on the f5. So what I was kind of wondering is does he want to trade the queens? Because one of my next moves is going to be like knight d5, and I'm going to trade queens, whether it's on his terms or my terms. And that's eventually basically what happened, but it wound up being more my term than his term. He plays knight b4. You know, the interesting thing is I did play bishop d3 in anticipation of knight b4. I just wasn't really sure that I expected him to really do it, because, I mean, what's the knight doing there? And then, I mean, all I have to do is move it, and the bishop is actually pointing in the right direction that I want him to point. Let me give you an example here. Look at this. I mean, he's pointing in that direction. I want to push my pawns that way. More than likely e5, so if I move him back to b1, then, you know, he's unhindered, and I get all the advantages. So bishop to b1, and now, as you can see, where's his knight going to go? What's it going to do? Go back? It's just like the king moves. So there's b5 finally. He probably should have done it earlier, like before he played from knight, like way back when he started moving his king. He should have started playing b5. So now this really doesn't do anything. I think I played e5. Yep. What e5 was to do is stop any counterplay with his knight. So wherever he moved his knight is basically will allow me to play knight d5, and he can't really stop it. Whereas if I did it now, then he could take the knight with this knight, and then I'd take here, and his knight is almost pretty, in my opinion, it's better now than it was before. So I'm kind of trying to take advantage of the fact that this knight is where it was. So that's why I played e5, because no matter what, eventually, like, take here and take here would lose the bishop. So he has to move the knight somewhere, and I guess knight g8 or knight e8. His choice was knight e8, and then so then I immediately placed the knight to b4. And the problem with that is that now he's forced to play knight c6, and in this it basically wins a pawn by force, because he can't take the knight. I guess you could say that since this position happened, you can almost say that knight b4 and queen a5 in combination with each other was a blunder, because, well, then and then the fact that he keeps moving his king back and forth. because this position would never have happened if he didn't do all that. If he would have went for that other plan, it might have been a lot better. So, and besides that, knight d5 is a common move. I mean, that should be one of the first moves that you consider when you're playing black as against the Marazzi bind, is the fact that he has the possibility of I think they call it a knight hop. But so I take. Here's my free pawn, and it's attacking with tempo, so the rook has to go somewhere. I mean, even if the rook moves somewhere, I still get more tempo. So if he moves like to c7, I still have the opportunity to play knight d5 in order to get out of any kind of strange oddities. And then he'd have to move back, and then even knight b6 would pick up the bishop pair. Even if I didn't have the stuff that I have, I still would have the bishop pair. So he moves it to b8, and then I play knight g5 check. This was part of the calculation of what is the problem with black right now, which is he's blocked off with this knight here. Let's arrow this. He's blocked off with this knight here, so he basically can only move this way. There's possibilities of a discovered check here, and then there's a pattern. So if we get rid of these arrows, make some more arrows, there's also another pattern here, which is if the king was to move back, and then it would be in the direct line of fire of this knight. So it would be forked. So now all you have to do is figure out how. You've already imagined that there's a fork there. Now you have to do, what you have to do is figure out why he would move there and not here if he was forced to do something like that. And that is the fact that there's a possible discovered check with this bishop, like this. So he might be afraid to move that way, and it would be dangerous. And then after that is, once you figured out that he could move that way, you already have a candidate move to make him move. So at the very least you can do, let's get rid of these arrows so they're not so confusing. At the very least you can calculate going knight to g5 right now, and then if he goes back you can take that and that. I think this was my first calculation, was that. But sacrificing both, sacrificing the exchange wasn't to my taste at the moment. It was interesting. I would have thought about it. Because, you know, right now I feel like I'm ahead. I am up a pawn. It would be the exchange for a pawn, so it would be interesting. But I feel that there's something stronger here. So we already know that after knight g5, which is probably the main candidate move, if king h7, well then e6 might have a pretty nasty consequence to it, like here, and then f5, and then if he takes again, then I would imagine knight takes check. Might be interesting. And then you still have check this way. If he keeps going back, you can, you know, keep taking things. See there, now you still win the exchange no matter what. So then what you had to do was think of another candidate move. And I don't think I really thought about anything on the wing here, except for pawn takes pawn. And the way I thought about it was, is that pawn takes pawn is always going to be there. Always. So then I shifted back to the king side. And we're still aiming down everything. And the only other two candidate moves that I can see is e6 and f5. And the bishop kind of stops that right now. I mean, we can play e6 and then knight g5 check, but that still goes to the fact that knight g5 is the main candidate move. F5 was actually pretty good. I considered that for a long time, because if bishop takes f5, then like knight takes f5 and I get the bishop pair with check. And I think that was my biggest debate, was between whether or not f5 was good and whether or not knight g5 check won me the exchange. I stopped myself for like, I think 15-20 minutes to actually look at it and see if I can find a way out for black, because this was my top one. So my calculation was like here, and I showed you the first calculation, which was king h6, and then I can actually maybe sack both pawns. So then my next calculation was here, and I needed to find out how the best way would be to maybe try to get this. And the first one was the one that I played, which was e6, and that is if he takes with the pawn, you got check. If he takes with the bishop, you got knight takes, and then check, and then, you know, I'm already up a pawn, so I'm not losing a pawn. And then after all that, can he take here? No, because it would be my turn, and I take there. Let's go back. I don't think I did very much. I just wanted to make sure that when I played e6, let's go do this. Knight g5, king h7, e6. I just wanted to make sure that when I played e6, there wasn't some strange, spectacular move. And for him, it might have been a little bit better if he played something like bishop c6, I suppose, and then let me take the second pawn, and then maybe not even that. I was hoping maybe I could get some kind of, I think I maybe went over this a little bit, but I don't know. At this point, I think let's check. I don't usually like to do this, but yeah, see, I've got like a rook's advantage, and usually when you think of rook's advantage, that's a win. So let's go back. Start e6. Yeah, it's atrocious for white, or for black. Anyway, we will stop this. I don't like looking at these stupid things. Okay, so here is move e6. We'll go through with the actual moves because you know what the calculation is. Of course you don't have to calculate this. I mean, now it's just positional chess, and he's hoping for some kind of tactical error on my part. It's the only reason the only two reasons why you would even consider playing on in this position is tactical oversight and seeing what kind of moves he can make to maybe better the position a little bit. It's not yet human resignable, but it's definitely computer resignable. So knight f6, that leaved a way for my bishop to be able to move here, so I move my bishop there, and it attacks the pawn. So in my eyes, this basically wins the game because I'm using the rule of two weaknesses, which is the pawn here and the pawn here and the knight here, and he can't defend both sides. There's the end of the pawn right there. I also could have taken this pawn as well by playing check here, and it would have won not only this pawn but maybe this pawn as well. There's also other possibilities, like I could have, well, not now, but there's also the possibility of f5. Usually when I play, this is how our games go, and sometimes he'll catch me off guard with a nice win from a flashy tactic, but usually this is how the games go. And pretty soon I'm going to put up the draw that he had. If I can find it, I'll put up the win too. That way I can analyze that again. Anyway, hope this was entertaining. This is mostly for me, but if anybody watches it, hopefully you guys find it entertaining.